Can a piece of ground truly remember violence? Can it keep pain the way a body keeps a scar? Most viewers of Killers of the Flower Moon learned about the murders of my people in the 1920s. At least 60 were killed for oil rights. What the film left out is that the killing never ended. It just evolved. The oil that made us the wealthiest people per capita, the same oil that was paid for my ancestors' blood, is not just a resource. It is a reservoir. It holds more than energy. It holds memory. It holds trauma. And in places where the earth's skin is thin, it holds something else entirely, a consciousness waiting beneath the prairie. I am Isaac Greyhorse, an Osage Nation police officer. This is not a story about ghosts. This is a report, a documented account of what happens when you drill into a wound that never healed, and what begins to climb out. The land remembers. And now it is awake. Our territory spans 2,300 square miles of what was once the largest tall grass prairie on Earth. Today, it's a landscape of contradictions. Rolling green hills cut by gravel roads, scattered blackjack oaks, and everywhere you look, the pumpjacks. They gnawed up and down, day and night, a steady mechanical heartbeat. To some, they are symbols of wealth. To me, they are old men bowing in perpetual prayer or mourning over something we took and can never give back. I am Isaac Greyhorse. My Osage name is Wajid G, person of the Middle Waters. I serve as a police officer for the Osage Nation, based out of Pawhuska. My jurisdiction is this entire county, a land where history is not a book on a shelf but a scent in the air, a tension in the soil. Our wealth comes from hedge rights, shares in the mineral estate beneath us, passed down through families like mine since the early 1900s. I inherited mine from my great-great-grandmother, Molly Burkhart. If you saw the film, you know her name. She survived the reign of terror. Most of her family did not. She lived into her 80s, a quiet woman who tended her garden and never, not once in the 40-odd years I was told about, spoke of those days. As a boy, I thought it was silence. On my late-night patrols now, driving these empty back roads under a blanket of stars, I finally understand. It wasn't silence. It was a full-body flinch. Some memories are so heavy that giving them words would make them real again, would let them out of the ground where they've been buried. But this story isn't about the 1920s. It's about the door those murders left unlatched, and what's tried to open from the other side now. The call that started it all came 6 months ago, in March. A medium-sized drilling outfit from Tulsa, Tallgrass Energy, had received permits for a site in the southwestern corner of the county. The location itself raised eyebrows. All our productive wells are to the north and east. This tract, near a place the old maps called Cedar Ridge, had been test drilled back in the 1960s. It came up dry. The geology report said the sandstone formation was too dense, the caprock impenetrable, not worth the investment. But tall grass arrived with new seismic imaging, new promises. They said they could see what others missed. The tribal council, always balancing sovereignty with revenue, approved. The projected royalties were substantial. I filed the permit notice and didn't think much of it. New operations start up now and then. Then I got a call from Jim Lookout. At 83. Jim's voice still carries the gravel of a man who spent a lifetime giving orders and expecting them to be followed. Isaac, he said no hello. You need to come out to my place. Now. I found him on his porch, staring southwest toward where the tall grass crews would be mobilizing. He didn't offer me coffee. You have to stop them from drilling at Cedar Ridge, he said, his eyes not meeting mine, fixed on the horizon. Jim, I'm a cop, not a councilman. I can't stop a permitted drill. What's the problem? That ground is bad, he said, the word landing with finality. Always has been. Bad how? I asked, leaning against his porch rail. He finally looked at me, And I saw a fear in his eyes I'd never seen before, not even when he'd talk about his time in Korea. Bad. Wrong. Before the oil, before the murders, before the white men, even that place was avoided. The grass grows different there. Shorter, paler, like it's sick. Deer won't graze it. Birds don't nest in the trees. My grandfather told me stories. Told me that people who went in there to hunt or gather sometimes came back. Changed. Quiet. Eyes empty. Or they didn't come back at all. The search parties would find their gear neatly stacked, as if they'd just walked away from their own lives. He shifted in his chair, the wood creaking. But it got worse. During the terror, in 1921, 3 families with allotments right in that Cedar Ridge Bowl died, all within a year. Not just died, Isaac. They were found wrong. He struggled for the words. Bodies decomposed too fast, turned black and liquid in days. Or they wouldn't decompose at all, just lying there staring up, fresh as the moment they died, for weeks. The old ones, the ones who still remember the real stories. They said the land there was hungry. They said the murders fed it, made it strong. After that, nobody built there. Nobody ran cattle. We just left it alone. We drew a circle around it in our minds and didn't cross the line. I felt a professional duty to dismiss it. Jim, I appreciate the history. I do. But I can't go to the council or tall grass with stories about hungry ground. I need environmental violations, safety hazards. He didn't get angry. He just nodded slowly, a deep sadness settling on him. Then don't stop it. Just watch it. Keep your eyes open. And when things start going wrong, and they will, boy, you remember I warned you. You remember that some doors, once opened, can't be closed. I drove away with a cold knot in my stomach. It was just a story, an elder's superstition. But Jim Lookout wasn't a superstitious man. He was a retired engineer. He believed in concrete and gravity. For him to speak, like that meant he wasn't recounting a myth. He was issuing a report. And 3 weeks later, I got the call that proved him right. My radio crackled with requests for tribal police assistance at the Cedar Ridge drill site. A fatality. I drove out as the sun began to dip, painting the prairie in golds and purples. From a distance, the site looked normal, a skeletal derrick against the sky, storage tanks, trailers. But as I got closer, I saw what Jim meant. The tall grass in a 50-yard radius around the pad was indeed stunted, a sickly yellow-green compared to the vibrant blue stem surrounding it. It looked drained. Sheriff's investigator Laura McKinn, a no-nonsense woman, I'd worked a few cross-jurisdictional cases with, met me at the crime scene tape. Her face was tight. Isaac, victim is David Priestley, 42, driller from Odessa, Texas. 5 years with tall grass. What happened? They were at 3,000 feet, making good progress. Then they hit a pocket. A kick, they call it. A surge of pressure from the formation. According to the crew, oil shot up the drill string with the force of a fire hose. Priestley was checking a connection. It caught him square in the face and chest. She led me toward a shape under a blue tarp. Isaac, fair warning. It's not good. She lifted the corner. I've seen traffic accidents, farm injuries, the results of bad decisions in bad places. This was different. David Priestley wasn't just covered in oil. He was saturated with it, infused. It coated him in a thick, glossy layer, filling his ears, his nostrils. His mouth was a dark, open O, packed with the viscous black fluid. But it was his eyes that froze me. They were wide open, and the oil had seeped beneath the lids, welling out from the corners and down his temples like grotesque, weeping mascara. It gave the impression he was crying crude tears. He drowned in it. Laura said flatly, dropping the tarp, but that's not the weird part. Come here." She walked me to a makeshift lab table, where a standard glass sample jar sat. Inside was about a pint of the oil they'd recovered. "Watch," she said. I did. For a few seconds, it was just black liquid. Then I saw it. A slow, sinuous swirl began in his heart, independent of any movement of the jar. It coiled upon itself, then slid up the side of the glass, clinging almost to the rim before gravity pulled it back down in a thick, deliberate drip. It wasn't bubbling from gas. It was moving, as if it were alive. "It's not like any crude I've ever seen," Laura whispered. "Too dense. Smells sharp, almost coppery. And it's warm. The lab will have a field day. The crew is spooked. Half of them are already packing their trucks." I spent the next hour taking statements. The stories were uniform. A sudden violent kick, a tragic accident. But as the official statements ended, the real stories began. A roughneck named Carlos Mendoza, hand shaking as he lit a cigarette, pulled me aside. "Officer, off the record? Last night, I was on tower watch. Midnight to 4. It's quiet, you know? Just the wind and the generator. But then I heard voices coming up from the well. Not an echo, not the pipe singing. Voices, whispering, talking over each other. Languages I didn't know. But one, he took a drag, his eyes distant with fear. One voice was clear. It was my abuelita, my little grandmother. She died in Monterey 10 years ago. She was calling my name, asking me why I was so far from home. He looked at me, desperate for belief. I told the Tulpusher. He said I was hearing things, tired. But this morning, before the kick, 2 other guys came to me, white as sheets. They'd heard things too, voices from the hole, calling for them. I took his statement, my professional skepticism crumbling with every word. As I left the site, the last of the sunset bleeding into night, I looked back at the derrick. It was silhouetted against a bruised purple sky, and for a moment I didn't see a machine. I saw a needle, a syringe plunged deep into the flesh of the earth, drawing something out that was never meant to see the light. And on the wind, I thought I heard a low, rhythmic sound beneath the generator's hum. Not a voice, a heartbeat. The sound followed me back to my patrol truck, not in my ears, but in the vibration of the steering wheel, a subsonic thrum that matched my own pulse. I drove the empty county roads toward Pawhuska, the prairie a vast, dark ocean under a spill of stars. It had always been a place of peace for me, this openness. But that night, the darkness felt observant. I wasn't being watched by anything with eyes. I was being assessed by the land itself, a patient, ancient presence noting the disturbance, the insult of the drill bit. I pushed the feeling down. Cop brain took over. Trauma, grief, suggestible minds in an isolated, high-stress environment. There was a rational explanation. There had to be. I didn't go home. I went back to Jim Lookout's. His house was dark, except for a single lamp in the front window. He opened the door before I could knock, as if he'd been standing there waiting. He took one look at my face and said, "Sit, I'll make coffee." In his small, neat kitchen, I told him everything. The death, the moving oil, Carlos Mendoza's story about the voices. He listened without interruption, his gnarled hands wrapped around his mug. When I finished, he was silent for a long minute, staring into the black liquid in his cup as if it, too, might start to swirl. "You know of those below," he finally said, not a question. I'd heard the term, a fragment from childhood stories, something whispered by my own grandmother before she too fell silent on the old ways. Vaguely, boogeymen stories, spirits in the ground. Jim shook his head slowly. Not spirits, not ghosts. They were here before the Osage, before the buffalo, before the grass. They lived in the deep stone, in the darkness beneath the world. When we came, we lived on the surface with the sun and the wind. We had an understanding, a boundary. They stayed in their deep places. We stayed in ours. The land was the buffer, the separation. He got up, moving stiffly to a bookshelf in the living room, from behind a row of Western novels. He pulled a ledger, its leather cover cracked and dry. My grandfather's journal. He was a clerk for the Indian Agency, but at night he wrote down the stories his own grandfather told him, the real stories. He opened it carefully to a page marked with a strip of faded cloth. His finger traced a spidery, faded ink. He writes here, long before the Middle Waters people walked this land. They were the first ones. They did not die when their world ended. They sank into stone and slept, and their bodies became the black blood of the earth. Their dreams became the pressure that pushes the oil upward. When we live in balance, honoring the earth, their sleep is deep and the boundary is strong. But when violence is done upon the land, when blood soaks the soil in anger and greed, he closed the boundary with a soft thump. Their dreams become troubled was just they remember hunger. It was, but it was also a feast. 60 murders, Isaac, 60 violent deaths. The blood of our people poured into the specific dirt, over the specific oil field. That wasn't just profit. That was a ritual, an offering they didn't even know they were making. It fed what sleeps below. It made the boundary at places like Cedar Ridge as thin as tissue paper. And now, he said, pointing a bony finger in the direction of the drill site, you've taken a needle and poked a hole right through it. A cold, logical part of my mind rebelled. Jim, you're talking about prehistoric monsters in the oil? That's not possible. I'm not talking about monsters with teeth, he said, frustration edging his voice. I'm talking about consciousness, memory. What is oil? It's the compressed remains of ancient life, millions of years old. What if some essence of that life, some pattern of being, survived the compression? What if it's all down there, not dead, but dreaming? And what if our violence, our most base emotion, is like an alarm clock screaming in the dark? He leaned forward, his eyes fierce. The drill isn't just pulling up oil. It's pulling up their dreams. And they're using it to climb back into our world. His words hung in the quiet kitchen, too immense, too terrible to fully grasp. I wanted to dismiss it as the ramblings of an old man mixing trauma with mythology. But I couldn't. I'd seen the oil move. I'd heard the fear in Carlos's voice, a fear that went deeper than a simple accident. The next week was a slow descent into the uncanny. The official report called David Priestley's death a tragic industrial accident. Tallgrass brought in a new crew lead, a hard-faced man from Louisiana, who told everyone to harden the hell up. The drilling resumed, and then the dream started. It wasn't just one or two men. It was most of the swing shift. They'd come off duty, exhausted, fall into their bunkhouse beds, and dream the same dream. They were falling, not plummeting, but drifting down the narrow, dark borehole, watching the layered rock walls slide past what felt like hours. But the walls weren't just rock. In the dream, they were membranous, organic, pulsing with a slow, wet rhythm. And at the bottom, they didn't hit rock. They plunged into a warm, black sea. It wasn't water. It was thick, and it held them. And from the depths below, hands, skeletal, oily, or weirdly fleshy, would reach up and gently, insistently, pull them down. They'd wake gasping, their sheets soaked with sweat that smelled faintly of petroleum. One worker, a kid named Brandon Foster from Wyoming, woke screaming. When he turned on the light, he found his hands and forearms smeared with thin iridescent film of oil. He hadn't been on a rig for 2 days. He was on his off-rotation. There was no rational way for it to be there. Then came Derek Sloan. His wife, Marcy, called me at the precinct, her voice thin with terror. Derek had woken up at 3 a.m., sat bolt upright in bed, and begun speaking in a guttural, choking language she'd never heard. His eyes were open but unseeing, rolled back in his head. It went on for 5 full minutes before he snapped out of it, collapsing back onto the pillow with no memory of the event. Marcy, smart and terrified, had recorded the last 30 seconds on her phone. I took the recording to Jim. We sat in his truck for privacy. He played it once, his face unreadable. He played again, slower, his eyes closed in concentration. When he opened them, they were full of a dread so profound it chilled me. "That's Osage," he whispered. "But not any Osage spoken in my lifetime. It's an archaic dialect. Pre-reservation. I only recognize it because my grandfather had wax cylinder recordings of the last speakers from the 1890s. He swallowed hard. He sang a phrase over and over. Mzin Ode. It means they remember the blood. And then Kai Sai. Feed them or they will take. Derek Sloan was a Baptist from Fort Smith, Arkansas. He didn't speak a word of any native language. "How is this possible, Jim?" "He's not speaking," Jim said, staring at the phone as if it were a venomous snake. "He's a speaker. Something is using his voice. Something that remembers the old words. It's broadcasting through him. A warning or a demand." 3 days after that, the drill at Cedar Ridge reached 4,200 feet. That's when they hit the pocket. Not a kick this time, but full-bore rupture. The pressurized oil shot up the casing like a geyser, a black column erupting 50 feet into the air before the blowout preventers finally engaged. It took them 6 hours to secure it, and mixed in with the thousands of barrels of oil that flooded the containment pit were other things. Fragments, pale, worn smooth. The site superintendent, trying to be thorough, had them sifted out. They sent them to a lab in Tulsa. The report came back to me because the sheriff's office copied me on anything related to Cedar Ridge. The fragments were bone. Human bone. The initial analysis was baffled. Carbon dating was contradictory. The collagen structure indicated great age, hundreds if not thousands of years. But other isotopic markers suggested a much more recent origin. The head of the lab, a man with 3 PhDs, called me personally. His voice was a mixture of scientific excitement and deep unease. "Officer Greyhorse, this is unprecedented. It's as if these remains have existed in a state of temporal flux. They carry signatures of both deep antiquity and the modern era. The closest thing I can hypothesize is that they've been submerged in an environment that somehow blurs time. It's not possible, but it's what the instruments say." I stood at the edge of the containment pit the next evening, the setting sun painting the oily sludge a rainbow sheen. The pump jack was already installed, its head nodding with a slow, predatory patience. Thump swish, thump swish. With each cycle, I felt a faint, sympathetic vibration in the ground beneath my boots. It was pulling the strange oil up, and it was pulling something else up with it. Carlos Mendoza found me there. He looked worse than before, thinner, his eyes sunken and dark. "Officer," he said, his voice flat, "I need to quit, but I can't." "Of course you can, Carlos. Give your notice, get in your truck." He shook his head, go, a frantic, small motion. "You don't understand. I try. I pack my bag. I get in the truck. I put the key in. And then my body stops. My hand won't turn the key. My foot won't press the clutch. It's like a wall in my mind. A voice that isn't a voice says stay. And I can't fight it." A tear cut through the grime on his cheek. "We all feel it. The whole crew. We're trapped here. Something is holding us. And it's getting stronger every time, that thing." He pointed a trembling finger at the pump jack. takes another drink. To prove it, I walked him to his pickup. Get in, Carlos. I'm ordering you, as a police officer, to go home. Right now. He obeyed mechanically. He sat in the driver's seat, closed the door, put his hands on the wheel at 10 and 2. He stared straight ahead. The engine didn't start. He sat there, perfectly still, for a full minute. Then I saw his arms tense, the cords in his neck stand out. He was pushing against an invisible restraint with all his might. His knuckles white on the wheel, a low groan escaping his lips. Finally, with a ragged sob, he went limp, forehead resting against the steering wheel. He was crying silently. He couldn't leave. None of them could. The hole in the ground wasn't just a well. It was a magnet, and we were all made of iron. I took the evidence. The lab report on the bones, my notes on the shared nightmares, the recording of Derek Sloan's untranslated speech, and my own witness account of Carlos Mendoza's paralysis, to the Osage Nation Tribal Council. I requested an emergency closed session. I laid out not as a supernatural thriller, but as a complex crisis, a potential mass psychological event, a possible environmental contaminant affecting neural function, and a clear case of workers being coercively restrained, which bordered on unlawful imprisonment. I used the words geopathic stress and historical trauma resonance. I showed them the map of the 1921 murder sites Jim had helped me plot, the ring of deaths tightening around Cedar Ridge like a noose. I played Derek's recording, then Jim's translation. The room was silent for a long moment after I finished. I expected skepticism, demands for hard proof, even quiet dismissal. Instead, I saw a grim recognition settle on the faces of the older council members, particularly the elders from traditional families. Councilwoman Margaret Redcorn, in her late 70s, removed her glasses and pinched the bridge of her nose. "Officer Greyhorse," she began, her voice quiet but filling the chamber. "What you describe, it has a precedent. Not in the law books, in our family stories." She looked around the table, meeting the eyes of a few others who gave slow, grave nods. In the winter of 1921, during the worst of it, a well was drilled on the allotment of the Morrison family, southeast of Fairfax. It was a good producer. But within weeks, the family fractured. They turned on each other with violence that made no sense. The father shot a cousin over a trivial argument about a fence line. A daughter, a gentle girl by all accounts, tried to set her brother's bed on fire while he slept. And the workers, they became erratic, heard voices, had accidents. She leaned forward, her hands flat on the polished table. The oil company, Constantine Oil, capped that well after just 3 months. The official word was unprofitable formation. But my grandmother was friends with Lizzie Morrison, the matriarch. Lizzie told her the real reason. The oil that came out of that well was bad medicine. It made people see things, remember old hatreds, lose their connection to what's right. The company men knew. They'd seen it themselves. They poured concrete down the shaft and never spoke of it again. Another elder, Albert Horsechief, spoke up. Cedar Ridge is another such place. A thin place, where the veil between what is and what was, or what sleeps, is worn through. The murders made it thin. Your drill has torn it open. Then we have to shut it down. I said, a surge of relief washing over me. They understood. Margaret Redcorn shook her head, a look of profound weariness in her eyes. On what legal grounds, Isaac? Thin place is not a zoning regulation. Bad medicine is not an EPA violation. Tall grass has valid permits. The oil is real. It tests as high-quality crude, and the royalties are flowing into tribal and individual accounts as we speak. We have no standing. So we just let it continue? I asked, frustration rising. People are trapped there. They're being psychologically tortured. A man is dead. We don't let it continue, Albert said firmly. We prepare, and we find the right kind of help. Legal and scientific roads are closed to us. That leaves the other road, the old road. He looked at Margaret. We need to find someone who remembers how to mend the veil. That night, my personal phone rang at 2:17 a.m. The number was blocked. A cold certainty told me to answer. Isaac. It was a woman's voice, aged but strong, filled with sorrow so deep it was like a physical weight transmitted through the line. I knew that voice and the one surviving wire recorder my family possessed from the stories that shaped my childhood. Grandmother? The word slipped out before I could stop it. A soft, sad sound, almost a laugh. You sound like your father when he was scared. I am Molly. Molly Burkhart. The use of the present tense made my skin prickle. I have little time. The connection is difficult. It uses the oil in the lines, the memory in the wires. Listen, the black blood you're pulling from Cedar Ridge is not oil. It is She used the old word for blood, but not the blood of plants and dinosaurs. It is the blood of the first world, the world before this one. When that world died, its life did not end. It sank, and its spirit became the pressure. Its body became the black blood, and it remembers. It dreams of light, of form, of hunger. Her voice crackled, fading for a second before returning stronger. The murderers, my husband, my sisters, my mother, all that blood, all that pain and betrayal, it was a feast. It gave them strength. It taught them the taste of our kind of violence. And now you have given them a straw to drink through. You cannot stop what is coming. You have two choices: contain it or feed it enough that it is satisfied and returns to sleep. How? I breathed into phone, my hand trembling. How do I contain it? You must seal the tear, not with concrete, with will, with sacrifice. You must remind the boundary where it belongs. But the ceremony is mostly forgotten. You must find Raymond Red Eagle. He lives near Hominy. He is a Wathar rememberer. He may know the way, but be warned, great-grandson. To mend such a tear requires a thread from both sides of cloth. Someone must stand in the breach. Choose quickly. They are already walking in the skins of your workers. They are learning how to be here. The line dissolved into a hiss of static that sounded, for one terrifying second, like a chorus of whispering voices, before cutting to a dial tone. I sat in the dark, the phone slick in my hand. The call hadn't felt like a hallucination. It had felt like a long-distance call from a very distant, very dark place. The authenticity was in the details, the subtle southern Osage cadence she'd lost in later life. The specific term Wathar I hadn't heard since my own grandmother died. This was either the most elaborate psychological breakdown in history, or my dead great-great-grandmother was using the petroleum network as a spiritual telephone. Sleep was impossible. I went to my home office and began to research in earnest, not as a cop, but as a descendant. I accessed digitized archives, cross-referencing the 1921 FBI case files with tribal records. What I found was a pattern of deliberate omission. The FBI, focused on building a winnable case agreed, had sidelined any testimony that spoke of cursed oil or haunted ground. These statements were not included in the official record, but they existed in the interview notes that I read. The statement of Lucy Tallchief, whose uncle's body was found in a creek near Cedar Ridge, swollen with oily water, though the creek was bone dry. The statement of Thomas White Eagle, a derrick man who swore his drill bit brought up a slurry of oil and something like rotten meat from a depth that should have held only fossils. I plotted every strange death, every report of anomalous oil or behavior. From 1870 onward, they clustered like flies on a map. with the densest, most violent swarms centered precisely on the Tallgrass Energy's Cedar Ridge drill pad. It wasn't random violence. It was nourishment, a ritual feeding ground. At dawn, I drove to the Osage Nation Museum in Pawhuska. The curator, Dr. Evelyn Black, was an old friend. She saw the look on my face and wordlessly led me to the climate-controlled archives. "Jim Lookout called me," she said softly. "He said you'd be coming. You're looking for the Henry Rowan Journal, aren't you?" She brought me a small, fire-scarred metal lockbox. Inside, wrapped in acid-free paper, was a leather-bound journal. Henry Rowan was a young, educated Osage man murdered in 1921. His journal entries started as mundane notes on cattle and weather. But in March of that year, the tone shifted. March 10th, the new well on the northwest quarter began to flow. 30 barrels a day. The oil is strange, too viscous, has a sweet, sickly smell like rotting flowers. The driller, a white man from Texas, joked it was old blood. I did not laugh. March 15th, found a seep in the horse pasture 200 yards from the derrick. No logical source. The soil around it is black and dead. My mare will not go near it. Whinnies and rolls her eyes in terror. March 22nd, woke to find a puddle of it on my bedroom floor. No leak from the roof. No explanation. When I wiped it, my hand was numb for hours. Dreamt I was drowning in a warm, black sea. Faces looked up at me from below. Familiar faces. They were not drowning. They were waiting. March 28th. Told the landman from the company we must cap the well. He laughed. Called me a superstitious Indian. Said the oil was worth a fortune. I told him some fortunes cost too much. He did not understand. The final entry was dated April 2nd, 1921. They're in the walls now. I hear them at night, scratching, mimicking the voices of my family, calling me to the well. They say I can be with my father again. I know it is a lie, but the voice sounds so much like him. God help me. I am going to shut it down myself tonight. Henry Rowan's body was discovered on April 5th, slumped against the wellhead. A single gunshot wound to the back of his head. It was ruled a suicide. The well was capped shortly after, not by the company, by the tribe, who quietly purchased the headright back from his terrified family. I closed the journal, my hands cold. The blueprint was a century old. Greed opens the door. The thin place is violated. The energy within reacts, manipulates, feeds on violence. And someone who tries to stop it pays the ultimate price. I was reading my own potential obituary. The next afternoon, Jim and I drove down a dusty lane to a small, ramshackle house outside of Hominy. A ceremonial arbor stood in the back, freshly swept. Raymond Red Eagle came out onto his porch as we pulled up. He was in his 70s, lean as a whip, with eyes that held no warmth as they settled on me. "Jim," he said by way of greeting. Then his gaze cut to me. And Isaac Greyhorse, Molly's boy, the police officer who cashes his headright checks every quarter. You profit from the very thing that killed your ancestors. Why are you here? His directness was a physical blow. Because what that prophet has unleashed will kill more. Osage, white, it won't care. It's hungry and it's learning how to eat. "Let it eat the oil company, men," Raymond said flatly, turning to go inside. "It will eat everything, Raymond." Jim's voice was sharp. You know the stories. Once the zoo breaks through, it doesn't stop at the property line. It will spread through the oil, through the water, through the dreams of everyone living on this land. Children, Raymond, your grandchildren in Tulsa, will dream of the Black Sea. Raymond stopped, his back to us, shoulders tense. After a long minute, he sighed, a sound of immense weariness. You want to perform the Coshope, the ceremony of the sealing earth. The prayers haven't been said in full since before the boarding schools. The songs are fragments. My knowledge is a patchwork quilt with half the pieces missing. It's more than anyone else has, I said. He turned his eyes searching mine. The ceremony requires anchors. 7 people. They must be of the Osage, and their families must have shed blood on that specific land. They must be tied to it by trauma and by title. Their head rights are not just deeds. They are hooks in their spirits, connecting them to what's below. You would be one. You would have to stand in the circle and offer your connection as a thread to reweave the veil. It is dangerous. If it fails, the backlash could snap your mind. Or worse, it could open you fully, make you a permanent door. I didn't hesitate. I'll do it. And Raymond continued, his voice grave, the drilling must stop, completely, for 3 days and nights. The machinery disrupts the vibrations of the earth. The ceremony requires silence, so the old songs can be heard. Can you make that happen? I thought of the corporate directives, the quarterly reports. I'll make it happen. He studied me for a long, hard moment, then finally gave a single, slow nod. Then we have no time to waste. Take me to this Cedar Ridge. I must see the Wound with my own eyes. The drive to Cedar Ridge was made in near silence. Raymond Red Eagle sat stiffly in the passenger seat, a bundle of sacred cedar and sage on his lap. As we turned off the county road onto the gravel track leading to the drill site, he began to breathe differently, shallow, careful breaths, as if the air itself had become toxic. "Stop the truck," he said, his voice tight. We were still a quarter mile from the pad. He got out and stood on the gravel, facing the distant derrick. He didn't speak for a full minute. Then his knees buckled. I grabbed his arm to steady him. He was trembling. "The boundary," he whispered, his face ashen. "It's not just thin. It's in tatters, like a rotted blanket. I can feel the draft from the other side." He pointed a shaking finger. "Do you see it? Around the wellhead." I squinted. The afternoon sun was bright, glinting off metal. But around the base of the pump jack, the air seemed to waver, like heat rising off asphalt, but denser, with a faint, oily rainbow sheen. It wasn't an illusion. It was a visible bleed-through. "We should not go closer," Raymond said, but he was already walking toward it, compelled by a dreadful duty. "But we must." As we approached the perimeter, the feeling of being watched intensified into a feeling of being consumed. Every step forward felt like pushing against a cold, sentient current. The pump jack's rhythmic thump gush. Thump gush was no longer just a mechanical sound. It was a heartbeat, and the ground beneath us pulsed in time with it. Raymond walked directly to the wellhead, ignoring the few sullen workers who watched us from a distance. He placed his palm flat against the cold steel of the Christmas tree valve assembly. He jerked it back instantly, hissing in pain, examining his palm. A red, blistering welt was already rising, as if he'd touched a hot stove, but the metal was cool to my touch. "It's not oil in there," he said, cradling his hand. "It's essence, concentrated life force from a time before time. They didn't just die and become petroleum. They transformed. They became this potential, this dreaming anger waiting in the dark. And you," he looked at me with a mix of pity and accusation, "have given them a speaking tube. You've piped their nightmares to the surface and called to progress." He knelt, ignoring his pain, and scooped a handful of dirt from the base. It was dark, too dark, and left an iridescent smear on his skin. He let it sift through his fingers. "The ceremony is our only chance. We will need the 7 anchors. I will find the other 6. They will be descendants of the families who died there in 1921. We will need 3 days of absolute quiet. No engines, no drills, no voices but our prayers. We will sing the songs that name the earth and strengthen its skin. We will offer the ancient words that remind the boundary of its purpose. And we will need a sacrifice of connection. Each anchor must be prepared to sever their personal tie to the oil's wealth, in spirit if not in law, to renounce the profit of that blood. He stood, brushing the cursed dirt from his hands. Your job is a silence. Make this place still. If the drilling continues, the ceremony is dust. The songs will be drowned out by the noise of the wound itself. Making it silent was the impossible part. Dale Hoffman, the site manager, was a pragmatic man now visibly haunted. He wanted to shut it down, but a call to Tallgrass Energy's headquarters in Tulsa yielded nothing but corporate obstinacy. Unscheduled downtime is not in the budget, Officer Greyhorse. Unless you have a state regulator or an EPA shutdown order, we operate. Safety is our priority, and we've implemented new protocols. The voice on the phone was smooth, untroubled by bad dreams or moving OIL to SO. I chose a different path. That night, under the cover of a moonless sky, I returned alone. I was no saboteur, but I knew enough from my time around rigs to be selectively disruptive. I didn't damage anything permanently. I simply misaligned. A critical hydraulic line was loosened at a coupling. A sensor cluster was carefully shielded with a scrap of aluminum foil, making it read constant pressure. The main drive belt for the mud pump was treated with a slick, non-conductive grease. The failures would be puzzling, intermittent, and time-consuming to diagnose. It would look like a bizarre run of bad luck, faulty parts, gremlins in the machine. It would buy us, if we were lucky, 72 hours. As I worked in the profound dark, the wellhead beside me seemed to breathe. The thump gush was quieter, idle, but the presence was louder than ever. The whispers Carlos had described were no longer whispers. They were a susurrating chorus, a cacophony of half-heard words in dead languages, mournful cries, and wet, slithering sounds. It all, and beneath, rhythmic pull, a magnetic yearning that tugged at the iron in my blood. I felt a sudden, overwhelming urge to place my ear against the wellhead, to listen closer, to understand. My phone vibrated in my pocket, a jarring lifeline, a text from an unknown number. It read, *clever, but the silence you seek is a deeper one. Look at the hospital, *, the hospital, Brandon Foster. I drove to the Indian Health Service Hospital in Pawhuska. The night nurse, a friend, met me with a worried look. He's stable. But Isaac, he's not right. He shouldn't be stable. His injuries, they were catastrophic. Multiple compound fractures, internal bleeding. We were prepping him for a medevac to Tulsa when his vitals just stabilized, and then they began to improve, faster than any human being can heal. She led me to the ICU. Through the glass, I saw Brandon Foster. He was propped up, eyes open, staring at the ceiling. Wires and tubes snaked from his body. His skin had pronounced unsettling sheen, like a film of rainbow oil on water. His eyes were worst of all. The scare were darkened to a smoky gray, and his pupils were vast, black pools. He doesn't sleep, the nurse whispered. He just lies there, and sometimes he smiles. As if on cue, Brandon's head turned slowly, mechanically, toward the window. His eyes locked onto mine. That terrifying, knowing smile stretched his cracked lips. When he spoke, it wasn't through the glass. The voice was in my head, a layered chorus of dozens speaking as one. Yet I heard it as clear as my own thoughts. Officer Greyhorse, the inheritor, the one who polices the surface while drawing wealth from the depths. We know the taste of your lineage. Your Molly was strong. She resisted the feeding for so long. Her fear was flavorful. I tried to step back, but my feet were rooted. The voice continued, a psychic intrusion. You check your hands for traces of us every morning. You avoid mirrors in the dark. You feel most alive in the deep night, when the walls are thin. You have always been ours. You just didn't know the name of what called you. It was voicing my deepest, most private shames, the hypervigilance, the unease with my own reflection since this began, the way the prairie darkness had shifted from peace to familiar, dreadful homecoming. Then the chorus fractured. For a second, the psychic noise cleared and a single young, terrified voice broke through, Brandon's own. It was a weak mental whimper. Help me. It's inside. It's building me back wrong. It's using my bones like scaffolding. Please, don't let it finish. The chorus slammed back, drowning him out. The thing wearing Brandon's body tilted its head. The ceremony will fail. Raymond's knowledge is a ghost. Our memories are older than his songs. We have been patient. We have been waiting in the blood of the world. And now we have a model. It looked down at Brandon's hands, flexing them slowly. We are learning to be solid again. I stumbled away from the window, my heart hammering against my ribs. The nurse was asking me something, but her voice was muffled, far away. I had to get to the cemetery. I parked at the Osage Nation Cemetery and walked to Molly Burkhart's simple headstone. I sat in the dew-wet grass and talked. I told her about Raymond, about the planned ceremony, about the thing in Brandon's hospital bed. I confessed my sabotage, my fear, the terrifying pull I felt toward the well. The wind sighed through the pines. Then my phone rang. Unknown. I answered. You cannot fight them with their own tools. Molly's voice said, weaker now, strained. Sabotage is a violence. It feeds them. The ceremony is the only way. But Raymond is right. It is incomplete. He has the songs to summon the earth's strength, but he lacks the binding agent. To seal a tear between worlds, you need a thread that exists in both. A living anchor who voluntarily crosses the threshold and holds the seam shut from the other side. I understood with a cold, clear certainty. The sacrifice is renouncing the money. It's renouncing being here. Yes, her voice was a whisper now, fading. One of the anchors must stay, must become part of the boundary, a permanent guardian in the veil. It is a fate worse than death, Isaac. You would be neither here nor there. You would be the lock on the door. Are you prepared to be the lock? The line went dead. I looked at the headstone, at the dates marking a beginning and an end. My choice was not about life or death. It was about existence or purpose. I could live and watch this horror consume my homeland, or I could choose a different kind of existence to prevent it. I drove to Raymond's house as the first hint of dawn lightened the eastern sky. Jim was there, along with 5 others, 3 women and 2 men, all with the weary, resolute eyes of people carrying centuries of grief. The other anchors. Raymond was drawing a diagram in the dirt floor of his arbor. Tall grass will be down for 3 days minimum, I said, my voice sounding foreign to me. Raymond looked up, met my gaze, and saw the decision in my eyes. He didn't ask. He simply nodded, a gesture of profound and tragic respect. Then we begin preparations tonight. The ceremony will commence at sundown tomorrow. We purify ourselves today. We fast. We pray. We remember why we are Osage and what we are sworn to protect. He turned to the group. We do not sing to defeat a monster. We sing to remind a lost part of the world where its home is. We sing to heal a wound in reality itself. Our voices will be the needle. Our will shall be the thread. He then looked directly at me, his eyes holding a warning and a question. And one of us must become the knot. The day of preparation was a blur of ritual austerity. We sat in Raymond's sweat lodge, the steam scented with cedar and sage, purging not just dirt but intention. We confessed our fears, our angers, our complicities. One of the anchors, a teacher named Sarah, spoke of the guilt she felt every time her Headright royalty check arrived, funding her life with murder money. Another, an older man named Philip, wept as he recalled his grandmother's stories of the terror, the specific, chilling detail of a great-uncle who was found with his mouth filled with crude oil. We weren't just cleansing our bodies. We were draining the poison of inherited trauma, making ourselves hollow vessels for the old songs. As dusk approached on the day of the ceremony, we caravanned to Cedar Ridge. The site was eerily silent. My sabotage had worked. The derrick was still, the generators quiet. The only sound was the relentless, metronomic thump gush of the pump jack, which seemed louder and more insistent in the absence of other noise. The oily shimmer in the air around the wellhead was more pronounced, a visible wound in the twilight. Raymond had us form a wide circle, about 30 yards across, with the pump jack at the exact center. He took the north position. I was placed at the south. The other 5 anchors filled the cardinal and ordinal directions. We each had a small bundle of sacred tobacco. "We do not command," Raymond said, his voice carrying clearly in the stillness. "We remind. We call upon the true earth, the skin of the world, and ask it to remember its strength. We sing the songs of formation, of solidity. Our voices will be a wall. Our breath will be the mortar." He began. It was not a melody I recognized. It was a series of deep, resonant tones, more vibration than song, spoken in an achingly ancient dialect. It didn't come from his throat alone. It seemed to rise from his chest, from the ground beneath his feet. One by one, the rest of us joined in, not singing the same notes, but harmonizing with a pattern Raymond had taught us, a sonic representation of layers of shale, of bedrock, of unyielding granite. For 20 minutes, nothing happened. We were just 7 people chanting in a silent field, the pump jack mocking our efforts with its steady, sucking rhythm. Doubt, cold and slick, began to coil in my stomach. This was madness. We were trying to heal a geological wound with folklore. Then the oil in the storage tanks began to churn. A deep, glottal glug 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 echoed from within the steel cylinders. Then, with a sound like a sigh, black rivulets began to seep from the seams of the tank doors and from the valves. This was not a leak. It was a purposeful flow. The crude oozed across the hard-packed dirt, not following gravity, but moving deliberately toward our circle, as if drawn by our song. "Hold the circle." Raymond's voice boomed over chant. "Do not break." The oil reached the perimeter of our formation and halted, pooling in a perfect, glistening black ring around us. And then it began to move within itself. Shapes formed on its surface, not reflections, but reliefs. Faces pushed up from the blackness, their features defined by swirling, iridescent currents. I saw Molly's face, stern and sorrowful. I saw Henry Rowan's terrified eyes. Dozens of others, Osage men and women from the 1920s, their expressions frozen in final moments of betrayal or confusion. And beneath them older, stranger visages emerged, elongated, inhuman, with too many eyes or mouths that were mere gashes, the dreaming faces of the first world. Our singing grew louder, a desperate wall of sound against a rising tide of memory and hunger. The power Raymond spoke was real. I could feel a pressure building, a thickening of the air within our circle, a pushing back against the oily ring. Then they came. From the tree line at the edge of the clearing, figures emerged. Brandon Foster, walking with a stiff, unsteady gait, still in his hospital gown. Behind him came Carlos Mendoza, Derek Sloan, Jennifer Park, and the rest of the Tall Grass crew. Their eyes were the same smoke gray as Brandon's, their skin shining with that rainbow film. They moved in unison, a marionette parade, and stopped just outside the ring of oil. They spoke, their mouths moving in perfect sync, their voices a layered abomination that bypassed the ears and vibrated directly in the skull. Stop. This world was ours. The blood is the door. The door is open. We are already here. The psychic force of the words nearly broke my concentration. I felt a warm trickle from my nose. Blood. Sarah, to my left, let out a sob but held her note. And you? The chorus focused on me, all the blank, oily faces turning my way. You are already one of us. You carry the mark in your blood, in your deeds. You profit from the feast. Come, be the bridge, not the lock. The offer was horrifyingly seductive. It promised an end to the struggle, a belonging to this immense, ancient power. It named the secret shame I carried and called it kinship. For a second, the song died in my throat. I saw the truth of Molly's warning. The ceremony needed a knot, a living anchor in the veil. Raymond's songs could summon the earth strength, but only a conscious who could direct it could hold the suture closed. The thing inside Brandon was right. I was already a bridge. My inheritance, my guilt, my connection made me the perfect link. So I would use the link not as a bridge, but as a chain. I stepped forward, breaking from the southern point of the circle. Isaac, no. Raymond cried, but I raised a hand. I walked to the inner edge of the oil ring, facing the thing wearing Brandon. The chanting behind me faltered, then rallied, growing stronger, as if my action had clarified their purpose. I'll be your anchor, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. But on my terms. You release these people. You withdraw your influence from them completely. The drilling at this thin place ends forever. No more manipulation, no more feeding on violence. You exist as a presence in the deep, a memory in the stone, not as a ruler on the surface. And I will hold the boundary. I will be the lock on the door you're trying to force. The vessels stared, the chorus within them silent, deliberating. The oil on the ground swirled furiously, the faces within it contorting in what looked like rage, then calculation. The offer was unprecedented. A voluntary guardian, a permanent sentry born of the very lineage they had fed upon. It was a solution that offered them a kind of permanence, to not conquest, but a guaranteed, watched existence, a defeated emergence, or secured slumber with a warden. Finally, Brandon's mouth moved. The layered voice was gone, replaced by a single, grinding, stone-on-stone sound that was a consensus of those below. Agreed. The terms are set. The price is paid. Once sealed, the anchor holds until will and memory fade. And our memory is longer than your bones. I turned to Raymond. Now, seal it. Raymond's face was a mask of grief and awe. He gave a sharp, commanding cry, and the other 6 anchors began a new song, a descending, weaving melody that was a song of closing, of stitching. I stepped across the oil ring. The moment I crossed the threshold, the world split, watching my own body from outside and within. The other part of me dissolved. I felt myself unraveling, not into nothing, but into everything. My awareness flowed down, not through the well shaft, but through the soil itself, through root systems and worm tunnels, through pores in the bedrock, down into the immense, pressurized darkness of the oil-bearing formation. I was not alone. I was surrounded by the Zobe, the presence. It was not a monster. It was a vast, melancholic, and hungry memory, the collective consciousness of a world that had died screaming. It held eons of alien sunlight, of strange seas, of a violence that made the reign of terror look like a squabble. Its hunger was a hunger of exile, and it saw me, this tiny, fractured spark of will, and understood the bargain. My earthly body watched as the oil ring receded, flowing backwards with impossible grace, siphoned back into the tanks and down the wellbore, pulling the faces with it. The transformed workers, Brandon, Carlos, all of them. collapsed where they stood, the oily sheen evaporating from their skin like morning dew. My underground consciousness felt Raymond's song reach its peak. A final, profound chord of vibration resonated through the strata. And I, the anchor, held. I focused my divided will on the tear at Cedar Ridge. I didn't push the presence back. I gently, firmly defined the boundary. Here is above. Here is below. This is the line. I became the living manifestation of that line. With a seismic shudder that rattled the teeth of my skull, both of my skulls, the boundary sealed. The palpable wrongness snapped like an overtuned string. The air cleared. The pump jack gave one final, shuddering thump and fell still. In the clearing, my body staggered, then righted itself. I was back, but I was not whole. I was a tenant in my own flesh. 70% of my awareness remained below, a sentinel in the deep, holding the seal. 30% occupied my body, allowing me to walk, to talk, to function. I was a synecdoche, a part representing a whole that was now in two places at once. The workers woke confused, crying, free. The anchors broke their circle, embracing, weeping with exhaustion. Raymond walked to me, looked into my eyes, and saw the duality there. He placed a hand on my shoulder. "What har?" he said softly. "No longer remember, but guardian. Did it work?" My voice sounded distant to my own ears. "It worked," he said. "The door is closed, and you are the lock." The aftermath was a quiet, bureaucratic unraveling. Brandon Foster and the others recovered physically, though plagued by nightmares they could never fully explain. Tall grass energy, beset by the total inexplicable failure of all equipment at Cedar Ridge and spooked by the crew's mass psychological breakdown, declared the site geologically untenable and voided their lease. The tribal council, with newfound unanimity, designated Cedar Ridge a conservation zone in perpetuity. No drill would ever pierce that ground again. I still live in Pawhuska. I still wear the badge. I drive my patrol routes under the vast Oklahoma sky. But every night, when I close my eyes, I don't dream. I stand my watch. I feel the immense, sleeping pressure of the Zoe below, testing the seal with the gentle, persistent pressure of continents shifting. I hold. My surface mind investigates petty crimes, files reports, laughs with colleagues. My deeper mind communes with the slow time of stone and the ghostly echoes of a world before this one. My family knows I am different. They see me drift away in the middle of a conversation, my eyes losing focus as I attend to a tremor in the deep. They don't ask. Some truths are too heavy for words, and some sacrifices are too vast to be comprehended by those who live only in the light. But when a new mineral lease application crosses my desk, I know before I read the coordinates if it threatens a thin place, a coldness in my bones, a faint, discordant hum in my back teeth, a glimpse in a dream of twisting, oily faces. And I find a way, a soil instability report, an endangered species habitat, a historical preservation clause. To stop it, I am the canary in the coal mine for my people's soul. The land remembers everything. The blood, the oil, the greed, the sacrifice. And now, I remember with it. I am the memory made flesh, standing on the border, ensuring the horrors of the past remain buried, and the hunger of the ancient world remains a dream and not a waking reality. The lock turns, the door holds, and the prairie grass grows silently over the wound. This story is more than a tale. It is an echo of a truth that resonates in many places where the earth has been wounded and history has been buried but not forgotten. The Osage experience is unique in its specifics, but the pattern it reveals is universal. The exploitation of land is never just a physical act. It is a spiritual one. It rips at the fabric of memory, both the land's and our own. If this narrative held you, if it made you think about the hidden costs of the world we've built, then you understand the mission of this channel. Winds of Thought is dedicated to unearthing these buried connections between place and memory, between trauma and the present, between the stories we tell and the truths we feel in our bones. We believe that to understand where we are, we must listen to the whispers of where we've been. This is not easy work. These stories are heavy. They require research, respect, and a commitment to speaking hard truths in a world that often prefers comfortable silence. That's why this channel depends on you, a community of thinkers and feelers who believe some lights need to be shown into the dark corners of history and human experience. Your engagement is the fuel for this journey. It tells the algorithm that these stories matter. It allows us to dedicate more time, more resources to digging deeper and speaking clearer. So, if you want to hear more stories like this, account from the edges of understanding, where history, mystery, and human spirit intersect, please show your support, like this video. That simple click is a powerful signal. Subscribe to Winds of Thought. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a dive into the depths of a forgotten story. By subscribing, you become part of a community that values depth over distraction. And most importantly, continue the conversation below. Your thoughts, your experiences, your own local legends are vital. Do you know of a place nearby that feels thin? A location where the past seems to press too close, where stories of the land carry a strange weight. Have you ever felt that inexplicable sense of dread or profound sadness in a specific spot? A feeling that seems older than any event you can name? Share it in the comments. Let's build a map, not just of geography, but of memory. Your story might be the clue that helps someone else understand their own. The work of remembering is not a solitary one. It's a chorus, and your voice is needed. By liking, subscribing, and commenting, you help ensure that these essential winds of thought keep blowing, scattering the dust from forgotten graves and carrying the whispers of the past to those who need to hear them in the present. Thank you for listening. Thank you for caring. And thank you for being a part of this crucial exploration. The land remembers, and together we can choose to remember too.